Hello everybody, Conrad Fisher here, welcoming you back to our next section, the adrenal medulla. The adrenal medulla is extremely short. It has only a couple of basic points. You don't die with losing the adrenal medulla. Catecholamines have no effect on protein. Pheochromocytoma diagnosis. And for the extra point, glucose has to be metabolized all the way down to pyruvate and lactate in order to leave the muscle. I just summarized in 30 seconds the points out of this section. Let's say them all again 5 more times. Yes, it looks like an adrenal. So what's the normal output of the adrenal medulla? Well, normally the adrenal medulla makes 80% epinephrine and 20% norepinephrine. One of the things about pheochromocytoma is that it converts that and flips it. In pheochromocytoma, the reason it's a disease is that in pheochromocytoma, it flips it towards 80% norepinephrine and 20% epinephrine. That's one of the reasons it's a disease. Now, the other thing about the adrenal medulla is that it's the only place in the body that actually makes epinephrine. No place else makes epinephrine besides the adrenal medulla. And it's an extra. You see, the adrenal medulla is an extra to get you out of trouble faster than you can get into it. Remember, no place else except the adrenal medulla makes epinephrine. It's the only place. And that's because norepinephrine is converted into epinephrine. And the end products are that the epinephrine gets changed into metanephrine, and metanephrine gets changed into vanilla-mandylic acid. See, that's what the very word meta means. Meta means change. So epinephrine is changed into metanephrine. Norepinephrine is changed into metanorepinephrine. Now, in a normal person, the half-life of catecholamine is about 2 minutes. It comes, it goes, it's gone. And that's a good thing, too, because you don't want to live on your adrenals like I do and drive yourself crazy. But it's short, and this is part of the reason why making a diagnosis of a disease can be very difficult. Because when you're in between episodes, everything else is kind of low, because these things don't last very long. Epinephrine is only in the adrenal medulla. And the major difference between epinephrine and norepinephrine is its effect on beta-2 stimulation. The single greatest difference between epinephrine and norepinephrine is that epinephrine has beta-2 stimulatory tactics. Both of them stimulate alpha-1 and alpha-2. Both of them stimulate beta-1. Only epinephrine stimulates beta-2 receptors. So many of the actions of epinephrine mediated by norepinephrine, and so therefore you don't have to have it. I mean, it makes you fun, it makes you energetic, it makes you perky and filled with life. But since norepinephrine comes out of neurons, you could live off of the norepinephrine that just comes out of neurons. Now, the norepinephrine, on the other hand, is absolutely essential for life. If you didn't have the norepinephrine, you would die of blood pressure loss right away, because the norepinephrine comes out of the presynaptic terminals of your neurons. And without norepinephrine, you'll die of fatal hypotension instantly. The removal of the adrenal medulla lowers epinephrine, but it won't change norepinephrine levels. See, epinephrine is increased in response to stress, exercise, cold, emergencies, hypoglycemia. But it helps you. It's an extra. Now, you can see how there'd be a genetic survival advantage for this, because if you're trying to run away from other people in order to reproduce to make you, if you have epinephrine, you run away faster and get out of trouble, and you can survive to pass on that wonderful genetic impulse later on. So let's look at some of the actions of epinephrine. In the liver, it increases the activity of liver and muscle phosphorylases, so you can break down the glycogen and get it out of your liver and send it to the other organs. In the muscle doesn't have glucose 6-phosphatase, so the glucose has to be metabolized all the way down to lactate before it can be released into circulation. Now, the reason for the difference between these two is that the glucose that comes out of the liver glycogen and out of gluconeogenesis is meant to be released so it can go to feed the other organs. But in the skeletal muscle, we don't want that glucose to be released to feed the other organs. We want that glucose to stay in the muscle so it can stay to feed the muscle. We don't want the sugar that we need to be able to make things for other organs. We want the sugar in the muscle to stay there so it can be used as fuel to get out. For instance, if you're in a race car, you don't want to take the gas out of your own tank and put it into the other car. You want the gas to stay in your tank and get out of there. But the liver is like a kitchen. It's meant to make things so that other people can eat it. In adipose tissue, it increases the activity of hormone-sensitive lipase. Hormone-sensitive lipase is what takes fats out of storage. Hormone-sensitive lipase is what breaks down triglycerides. And it breaks down triglycerides so that it can release free fatty acids to feed the other tissues. Lipoprotein lipase is what takes things and puts them into storage. Hormone-sensitive lipase takes them out of storage, and so the free fatty acids can be used for lunch. The other effect of epinephrine is increasing the metabolic rate, of course. Now remember that epinephrine also needs thyroid hormones in the adrenal cortex to have maximum effect because there's a permissive action. Why are we not room temperature? Why do we have the ability to stay above room temperature all the time? Is because between thyroid hormone and catecholamines, we are able to maintain a constant body temperature through the metabolic furnaces in the entire body known as the mitochondria. This slide summarizes all the actions of catecholamines. The actions of catecholamines, it breaks down glycogen into glucose 6-phosphate, and the glucose 6-phosphate goes out of the liver so it can feed the other muscles and other organs. Now, glycogen that comes out of muscles doesn't want to be used up by other tissues. We need the glucose to be staying in the muscle so we can use it for lunch. It's not until it gets down to the burn of pyruvate and lactate. Isn't that why muscles burn when we're exercising? Many reasons, but one of which is that burn, that acid, helps remove oxygen from hemoglobin better. Now, it also takes triglycerides and pulls it out by activating hormone-sensitive lipase so that you can take fat out of storage and make it into free fatty acids. And that's why catecholamines are also ketogenic. Catecholamines are ketogenic. Pheochromocytoma is an adenoma. How do you know it's an adenoma, not cancer? Because it's functional. It's functional. It makes things. It switches the organ from being 80% epinephrine, 20% norepinephrine, and switches it into 80% norepinephrine. So it raises your blood pressure. Pheochromocytomas raise blood pressure because it switches it into the vasoconstricting alpha activity of norepinephrine. Pheochromocytomas are associated with multiple endocrine neoplasia syndromes. Okay, it's a memorized fact, 2A and 2B. And they're vascular and encapsulated, and they're usually benign. And benign means adenomas. Adenomas. Now, 10% are bilateral. 10% are bilateral. 10% are malignant. 10% are not even in the adrenal glands. They're in some ectopic focus somewhere. But there's an episodic release of hormone. But remember that in between episodes of hypertension, there is a profoundly low blood pressure in between episodes of hypertension. Paraganglioma means the neural ganglia on the side of your spine, on the side of your central nervous system. Pheochromocytoma is 10% outside the adrenal, paraganglioma. 10% is bilateral. 10% is malignant. Pheochromocytoma, remember, in between the episodes of hypertension, there's a profound low blood pressure. Now, hypertension with severe headache, diaphoresis, hyperglycemia, palpitations is not terribly specific. The key thing that will make you think about pheochromocytoma is that it's episodic. High blood pressure, but in between is low blood pressure. That's the key to this diagnosis. The test is 24-hour urine catecholamines or metanephrines. 24 hours, because remember, when you have a short half-life substance, walking up and saying, oh, your level is high. Well, maybe you're upset. Maybe you're angry. The level is high. Well, your level is low. Well, maybe you're just in between episodes now. The urine test will tell you what's the average been for the last 24 hours. What has the average been? So it'll tell you that the average level of production over 24 hours, and that's why urinary catecholamines are metanephrines. And metanephrines are the metabolic end product of epinephrine. So you say, what have you been producing over the last 24 hours? The standard of care in pheochromocytoma has been phenoxybenzamine, a peripheral-acting alpha blocker. Phenoxybenzamine followed by surgery. Phenoxybenzamine, which is an alpha blocker, followed by surgical removal. And that is the management of pheochromocytoma. Look for episodic hypertension, urinary catecholamines, and metanephrines. Scan them at the last. And remember, all overproductions in endocrinology never start with a scan. You never start with the scan in endocrinology because 10% of the population who's older can have an adrenal lesion. 5% of the general population, 10% of the older population. Never start with a scan. You might end up removing the wrong organ. You always confirm biochemically, then scan at the end. But you only scan after you've confirmed it biochemically.